Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chris McPherson Show, our weekly around the grounds coverage, picking up everything from your sporting landscape that might have slipped through the cracks or otherwise gone under your radar. We are looking forward to another big episode talking about plenty of different sports, covering the black and white of your sporting landscape. No grey opinions here. And joining me today on the show, our regular rugby league and NBL correspondent, Mr. Ben Dunn. Dunny, good to have you back.
G'day, mate. Good to be here.
And the man who is not only the jack of all trades, he's the master of a few, JR Carter, our producer, our F1 extraordinaire, and a very passionate Queenslander.
Hey, afternoon, boys. How we all been?
Very good. Very good.
Going very well. It's a wonderful time of year. The cricket's starting. The winter sports are finishing. It's that wonderful time when everything's overlapping. So we've got winter sports, we've got summer sports, we've got lots to talk about. But unfortunately, we're going to start on a little bit of a sad note, and anyone that knows me well knows that I'm very much an animal lover. And unfortunately, one of the most famous animals at the moment in terms of social media in the sporting world, Roscoe, the bulldog belonging to Lewis Hamilton, has passed away. This has been covered fairly broadly, but a little bit sad for Lewis in what's already been a bit of a tough year for him, JR.
Yeah, look, it is tragic, right? Really, like Roscoe has been like Lewis's constant companion for many years now, and like Lewis Hamilton's sort of advocacy for that breed of dog as well, like has been a big deal. What's really sad though is Ferrari seems to be sort of finding a couple of things recently as well. It'd be really sad if Lewis got a victory this weekend, but at the same time, be a great way to celebrate Roscoe.
It would be a great way to celebrate Roscoe. Dunny, it's one of those things that even some of my friends who aren't Formula One, fans, nerds, depending on how you want to classify people like JR and I, they've commented on it. One of my mates messaged me, when he first saw it and was just like, oh, it's really sad. Like, I loved when the couple of times they put the GoPro on Roscoe and they do the Roscoe pit walks and stuff. Like, it's just another one of those crossover things that F1's kind of managed to nail along with the Drive to Survive and those that have brought in the other fans. So it is a sad moment.
100%. And like you said, you're a pet fan. I think most of us are at least dog fans of some degree. So yeah, pretty sad that Roscoe has passed on. But I'm led to believe he had a good innings. So hats off for Roscoe. Hopefully he's up there chasing some balls wherever it is that dogs go.
Yeah, watching races in heaven or wherever it is that they end up, depending on your religious or non-religious bent. While we are on F1, not quite as tragic, but still very disappointing, and I'm still getting over it, was Oscar Piastri's last race out in Baku, JR. It's time for him to bounce back in Singapore.
Yeah, look, Oscar had an absolute weekend of it back in Baku, like qualified poorly and then just had a really poor start of the race. He actually did jump the start of the race. And that's sort of what brought him completely undone to start with, and he dropped down many places at that stage, and just because Fernando Alonso just paying attention to nothing but Fernando Alonso also jumped the start because he's seen the car in front of him take off, so he got the penalty for that as well. But Oscar, yeah, tragic going into the wall in like the first lap. What is also completely tragic is the way his teammate capitalized on all this stuff going on around him. He managed to, after Oscar qualified 9th, Lando managed to qualify 7th, and then he managed to only score a handful of points, and the gap really didn't change, to be perfectly honest. I think it's still sitting around 25 points at this point.
Yeah, it is at 25 points. And I don't know, Ben, they talk about, Schadenfreude and all that. But once Oscar crashed out, pretty much all I was really focused on in the race then was just hoping that Lando would slip further down. Is that what we've come to?
I think so, mate. It's probably that Australian bias. We want Oscar to do well. We want him to take the win and do it comfortably. And look, I don't think Lando's making any fans of his own with some of his behaviour. And then, like, obviously, he's promoting what's he got coming up? His Vogue cover or something like that, wearing his own merch and all sorts of things. So he's very much all Lando all the time. So yeah, I don't think you were the only one death riding him, but yeah, look, I was very impressed with how Oscar handled it. Set himself up on that corner, his banana, his apple, whatever it was, his phone up in the corner, watching the live stream as he's watching everyone go around. To me, that was a boss way to go out. If you're not going to finish the race, you may as well get prime position and enjoy it.
Yeah, 100%. One of the other stories that came out of the last race, JR, was the cross country adventures of Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc in their van.
Look, what was that video all about? Like, it's just a serious. Like, it seems like the sort of thing. Like, there's going to be a couple of PR people, not so much at Williams. I think Williams might have been like all for this kind of banter. Over at Ferrari, I'd imagine there's been like multiple meetings about this video, like behind closed doors. What were those two doing? And what was the substance that was in the van with them?
Yeah, it was an interesting trip that was going on, but apparently they were coming into. They were going to land in one airport, and then they got told just as they were about to land that there was really significant storms and it could be quite a dangerous landing. So they then departed and got diverted to Genoa. Then they landed there. Then they were talking to other people who were basically like, no, we got in fine. Then they tried to hire a car. It took them forever. They were in a rush, and then they walked out and they had this beat up old van. And then from what I can take from Colour Science's interviews, basically Charles Leclerc just got in the passenger seat and filmed him the whole way.
Yeah.
Look, Charles obviously realised what moment they were having together. It's good to see the two former teammates still hanging out as well, keeping that sort of amongst the grid camaraderie going on as well.
Yeah, exactly right. We like to see a bit of character to it and seeing how it goes. In terms of this week's race, JR, anything we need to be aware of, any tips, any tricks, anyone we're really looking out for? You talked about, obviously, there's a couple of those other teams starting to close the gap on the leaders.
Look, there's a couple of the other teams closing the gap, and there's one driver in particular that's just started his run home, and that is Max Verstappen. There is something going on with that Red Bull car, at that Red Bull team as well. We're starting to see something from Max. If Max gets a victory this weekend, I think it's actually game on championship. Lando's championship is over. If Max is involved, it comes down to Max and Oscar at that point.
Well, it's quite a gap. I think the gap at the moment's about 69 points, if my maths is correct. So it would be something. But again, if anyone can do it, we've seen him win the last couple of races. And, again, if winning those races wasn't enough for Max anyway, you get a weekend off and he goes and wins the GT3 JR. So, why not just keep winning?
I know. And I was sort of semi-tuned into it just to, because it was something to sort of watch. And then 10 laps in, he's a minute ahead of the rest of the field. What's going on here?
Yeah, it was bizarre. He just dominated as he does when he gets going in the F1 and can find what he needs to. So it's ominous, I think, for, as you said, for Oscar, certainly ominous for Lando. McLaren will still be chasing that opportunity to wrap up the Constructors' Championship, which they should do, as we know, but they bombed it the last race. Two other things I wanted to touch on quickly. One, which we were going to touch on last week, but we didn't end up recording. JR, you and I are now going to be MotoGP fans after Gunther Steiner, one of the great personalities of Drive to Survive, has gone and got himself involved in a MotoGP team for 2026. This is a great way from MotoGP to get some ratings. Yeah, look, it's sort of great. And there's three categories in each MotoGP, so there's a decent amount of broadcast, decent gaps between each race for him to get on camera and just give us some of his best. Yeah, Danny, I can see you nodding along. You're a Gunther fan as well?
Absolutely. I'm just waiting for him to talk about how we were a little bit shit or something like that. We can't get any worse than this. Let's see where the only way is up from the bottom, all those sorts of things. I can't wait to hear how he goes. But it was interesting to read that he was apparently or allegedly approached by some F1 teams, but he just chose to have a new challenge and try something different. So, look, he's got a bunch of experience there. He knows how to, obviously get the most out of his drivers. How many of those Haas guys went on to be bigger and better things? So, look, let's see how he goes. But, yeah, I'll be tuning in, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'll certainly be looking in for all the fooks and everything that come with it. Can't wait. Someone who might have been dropping some fooks recently is Australian F1 Academy driver JR. Ava Anagnostiadis, I think is how her name is pronounced. Unfortunately, the one Aussie in the F1 Academy, the female series, they've got their penultimate race this week in Singapore. She'll be out of that and likely miss the Las Vegas season finale next month as well. But probably just a name to watch. I'd suggest the 18-year-old, hopefully she can recover, and we wish her all the best. Yeah, look, the F1 Academy, it's definitely filling a void that sort of existed in the F1 world, giving the girls a pathway. We're surely getting close to seeing one of them in an FP1 session. Surely it's going to be in the next year or so that sort of thing occurs. There's no reason for them not to at this point. Yeah, well, we look forward to seeing that. Obviously, we've seen some women have some very limited success in a few of the other motorsport categories. So F1's kind of the last bastion. We know it's the pinnacle of the sport, so we will wait and see. It'd be great if it's another Aussie. You can never have too many Aussies in F1, JR. That's correct. And just remember, 1 year on, let's remember Armand Danny Rick. I was just going to lead to that to wrap up our F1. It has been a year since we've had Danny Rick in action. Obviously, it's been a pretty rough year for Aussies losing their seats in the last 12 months. We've had two of them go by the way. Of course, Jack Doohan's fleeting F1 career, but maybe we'll see someone else next. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll see Jack back there. I don't think we'll see Danny Rick, but he will be everywhere anyway in marketing and advertising, so we'll never miss Danny Rick.
That's right. Danny Rick he's very much declared he's not driving again, but he's definitely never going to leave our lives.
Yeah, I have a bit of a sneaking suspicion that we might see Danny Rick entering our sphere later on when maybe Marcus Soinus wraps up his cricket career. The two of them quite good mates, and we may see those sorts of guys getting together for a podcast, which could be quite loose, quite rogue, and quite entertaining. But moving on from F1, let's talk about the peak of the footy seasons. It is the greatest day in an NRL fan season, especially if you happen to be a fan of the team playing, but even for the neutrals coming this weekend. And Dunny, let's very briefly, JR and I unpacked those prelims on Sunday afternoon, but they were two of the more enthralling games, especially that Sunday game between the Broncos and the Panthers. The Broncos just keep finding ways out of jail. And surely the fact that we've seen two of the best games in recent memory on Sunday afternoons in the sunshine has to suggest that a Sunday grand final can't be too far away during the daytime.
Surely not. And look, all the feedback online when you sort of jump on and check out the comments, as I like to do, just to sort of see some of the craziness that goes on in there. But so many of the people are calling for it. Harkens back to our youth, that's for sure. Like, I remember every grand final day was about a 3:05 kickoff, and it was all you could think about all day. Like, you'd get up in the morning, you'd watch the President's Cup through into your reserve grade, and off you'd go. It was the greatest time to be alive, and I think things have gone downhill in the world, not just NRL, since we moved to a nighttime grand final.
Well, that's a bit of correlation versus causation, I think.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, look, hopefully they bring it back. I think it'll get more of the viewers in. Like, it seems to work for the AFL, so why not for us? I know there was a thing years ago when Gallup brought it in about trying to get more of the primetime viewers, and it was the more advertising revenue and all those sorts of things. But I think we've shown that at these day and age, NRL's a better TV product than the AFL is anyway. And if the AFL is still doing large numbers, then there's nothing to say that the NRL won't. And I mean, it's going to be a lot easier for the parents of the little kids to tune in and all that sort of stuff anyway. So I'm all for it. Bring it back. 4:00, off we go.
Yeah, I don't mind a 4:00 kickoff, especially knowing that we go into daylight savings that weekend here in New South Wales as well. There's a lot of benefits, a lot of opportunities out of that. And if you've got a 4:00 for that, then you can do a 1:30 for the NRLW. You can do an 11:00, which is still not that early. That state championship game is always going to be in the middle of the day. It's going to be in the sun, even if you're playing a 7:00 kickoff, because you're going to play at 1:30.
Yep.
So I don't see any real reason we can't do it. It is a big day. It's probably an early start if you want to go to all three games, but that's part of what you go. It's going to be a big day either way. And if you've got a 4:00 kickoff, that means if we're going into extra time, you're going in just before 6 p.m, just as the sun's beginning to set. And it's really unlikely we're going to get to 6:45 unless we've got half an hour of extra time, in which case it's well worth seeing the sunset while it happens.
Yeah, that's right. And look, having been to a few grand final days in my time, shout out to
not watching the Sharks.
No, well, only one of those. But this week in league, boys, like, you usually would run some sort of event, but you were often starting at 10, 11, 12 o'clock in the day anyway. So I don't see why it's any different. Like, those who are into the grand final and want to be about that sort of experience, are going to do it regardless of what time kickoff is.
Yeah, you have a nice lunchtime barbecue, JR, roll through into the afternoon, and then have a sobering up dinner after the game.
Yeah, look, it does sort of lead to that sort of thing, like where, like, with it being so late, you don't get that after sort of party effect either. Like, I remember, like, with like a lot of, like, particularly like when I was sort of in my sort of late teens, early 20s, like you'd have your grand final afternoon barbecue, you'd watch the game, 6 o'clock roll through. You still kept socialising afterwards. What is now, like, you sort of got people rocking into, like, if you're having a little watch party, you probably got people rocking up at like 5:30, 6 o'clock. So, like, that social aspect's not really there.
Yeah, I think to Dunny's point, I think it tailors more to families. I think we've seen with the numbers that have been watching the games on a Sunday afternoon, the last week 1 and week 3 of the finals, all those sorts of things, and the pure standard of the football that we've had. Yes, it's a little bit tougher on the athletes, but they're at the peak of their season. It's not that much different realistically. I'm really looking forward to hopefully, it sounds like the winds of change, as you said, Ben, are going that way. But obviously this year we are still looking at that night grand final. It is, though, going to be the Melbourne Storm versus the Brisbane Broncos, the pride of Queensland versus the pride of Queensland, JR.
It is like two Queensland-fed teams. Like what? And there's one team that I need to see sort of win a premiership again, and that is the Brisbane Broncos. Like we were robbed last time we were there. We were robbed the time before we were there.
Robbed by Ben Hunt.
That was the time before. But yeah, like I said on the Daily Dose a few days ago, this is Ben Hunt's chance for redemption. Like if he can have a clean game and not throw it to an opposition player, he's earned his redemption arc.
If we're talking that, has he not already done it with his performance on Sunday, with the fact that he got him back in the game, he still steered the ship around?
He's set up his redemption arc last Sunday.
He set it up, okay.
Like don't get me wrong, he's got a long way from where he was.
Well, I think the monkey's off the back. I think he's ready to go. They've retained the same spine for the weekend, haven't they?
Well, that's what they've named on a Tuesday, Ben. Let's just remember what happens in rugby league, okay? So I'll believe it when it gets confirmed an hour out from kickoff. If I'm Corey Pakes, I'm still not sure I'm playing. It's going to be an interesting one, to see which way they go about it. But the other one, obviously, Adam Reynolds can stamp himself here too. As he was that big signing for Brisbane. Obviously, the hamstring, he was quite cagey early in that game. So I think there's quite a legacy-defining game for two veterans of our game in Ben Hunt and Adam Reynolds. And Adam Reynolds, of course, a New South Wales superstar. So we're still helping you out there, JR, with, just like back in the day when it was Lazarus carrying the team.
Look, you're right. Lazarus did carry that team for a long time. But with that said, though, Reynolds had a great game last weekend as well. Like he seemed like the kicking game wasn't going quite right from the sideline, so he took over himself and scored those game-winning points. So, yeah, look, I think he's got a legacy to build at Brisbane. Like he's obviously had success in grand finals before down at the Rabbitohs, but this is his time to sort of bring it to Brisbane.
It's one of those things, right, Dunny? You win titles with two different teams at opposite ends of your career. It's kind of a really good way to bookmark it. We talked about Glenn Lazarus before. He's the one man who's won it at three different clubs. You go down as not only a trivia question answer, but you'll go down in history when you can manage to do that so far separated.
Yeah, 100%. And look, say what you want about him, like with his injury problems and all those sorts of stuff. He has been incredibly consistent throughout his career. Like his floor and his ceiling aren't very far apart. His best game isn't that far removed from his worst game. Like he delivers. He's always got an answer. And he's going to be someone that the Melbourne Storm really have to watch out for this week, because like when he, as JR was saying, when he was taking those kicks from the sideline, the first thing I said was, "Oh, this will test the hamstring," and mate, he put that over the black dot without a worry. So he seems to have healed up. He seems to be firing at the right time. I did have questions, as I think we raised last week, about whether he was the right person to bring into a team that was seemingly doing well, and he handled it perfectly. Had some big boys running at him all afternoon, took some tough traffic down that side, handled it all. And yeah, look, I think they're going to be very tough to beat this week.
Yeah, I think there's lots of positives to take out of both his and Jerome Hughes' returns. Jerome Hughes, absolutely phenomenal. I was talking to someone about this earlier today, and the fact, Shane Webke back in the day, it was a miracle recovery after 5 weeks from a broken arm. Very different position, admittedly. But, we're still talking that, this is going to be less than a month on Sunday from when he first broke the arm. So phenomenal for him. It'll be interesting to see how he backs up. But, Dunny, I want to ask your opinion. Last week it was Reece Walsh making headlines in press conferences. This week it's the quietly spoken Stefano Utoikamanu, who's come out and said that basically he thinks that the Broncos players are stuck up. He doesn't like them and can't wait to run at them. I don't think he understands where Payne Haas grew up, but that's a whole other story for another day. We might send him a photo of Fred Harvey Oval downtown Woodbury. But Payne Haas has just come out and said, yeah, well, I don't mind if that's what he wants to say. I can't wait for the kickoff of this, because those two are surely going toe-to-toe. Surely if Brisbane win the toss, they're kicking off right down Stefano's throat, and Stefano's going to shoot out of the line if Brisbane are receiving.
Yeah, look, I love those big boy clashes, and that's what these big games are all about to me. Like whether it's the first hit up of an Origin or the first of a grand final, there's always plenty of passion and intensity in it. And mate, he has lit the fuse in the wrong person. Like Payne Haas has been the form forward of the finals, and like you said in the Daily Dose the other day, like his effort on effort on effort to back it up, and he just seems to have the world's largest motor for a prop. I've never seen anything like it, and having played my fair amount of front row games in D grade. It's not an easy position to play, and like to be able to keep turning up like that and ripping in and playing with the effort, the intensity that he plays with, mate. He's a pretty incredible player, and I'm glad he dons the blue 3 times a year as opposed to the maroon. But I don't know if I'll be cheering that hard for him going in the Broncos jersey.
Well, I think we need to remind people, JR might not know this, that he's, bookmarked between two, props who took on, some members of the Haas family in a game of rugby league there at Woodbury way back in the day, Ben. Not well, but we did. JR, on, the way the game shapes up, all those sorts of things. Obviously, we've talked about the fact that Payne Haas played that 80 minutes last week, him turning back up for that effort, how that's going to shape. But the one thing we know, those comments from Stefano Utoikamanu, whether or not they're about Payne Haas, Michael Maguire, Madge is definitely going to convince Payne Haas they're about him.
Oh, absolutely. Like he will, it's going to be reminiscent, I think, of the Waterboy is what we're going to be seeing here. Like we're going to see some tackling fuel coming up. And like, I just wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that. Like I think
Stefano is the devil.
I think he has made a mistake.
He definitely
well,
has.
it's going to be interesting. The other thing that's interesting, Dunny, is obviously for a long part of the early Melbourne Storm dynasty under Craig Bellamy, Michael Maguire was his right-hand man. He was the attack coach for Melbourne for a long time there, working in with the likes of Matthew Johns coming down and doing the halves work. We're going back to the Cronk, Smith, Slater era here. So this is, as much as it doesn't look like it, because, Madge has had a tough life after that time at the Tigers, this is the master versus the apprentice.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, when you watch them play, they do seem to, in some instances, have pretty similar styles. They try and sort of beat you through the middle, and then there's always an essence of a little trick play in there, whether it's sort of coming back inside or it's sort of running a short ball to go long. There's always something that's a little bit tricky in both of their game plans that you've got to be prepared for. Like we saw with Munster kicking back inside. Hughes stepping off his right and going through. Like there's always a little wrinkle in there for both of these sides that, they seem to maybe have a good fitting of each other and going to make for a pretty compelling contest on Sunday.
It certainly will be a compelling contest. I think both sides know where their weaknesses sit on the others. They both got defensive lapses in their edges. But now I'm going to put you on the spots, gents. I want to tip who's going to win. You can give me a bit of a margin if you want, and who's going to claim the Clive Churchill medal. I'll go first with my tip. We'll go through with our tips, and then we'll do our Clive Churchill medals for best on ground. I've got the Storm winning this one by 8. Ben Dunn, over to you.
I've got a similar margin, but I'm going to actually lean in the Broncos. The reason being that they just seem to find a little bit of magic this final series. They seem to be able to just sort of get it over whoever they're playing. And Melbourne Storm are nearly going to have to be perfect. And like you said, they've got those lapses, they've got those errors in them. So I'm not sure that they've got another perfect performance in them to be able to get far enough in front of Brisbane that Brisbane aren't going to be able to sort of come back and run over the top of them. So yeah, I've got Brisbane by 8.
Well, the Broncos have come back from 14 or more points down 5 times this season, including twice in the finals. But the thing for me is I don't think we've seen the best of these teams yet. And even when we look at last week, maybe some fortunate bounces of the ball, even that Casey McLean try. Like he could have got onside and taken that intercept. He just didn't. I don't know whether Brisbane get that lucky again. JR, I have a feeling that you're going to make this 2-1 in favour of the Queenslanders.
Look, I'm obviously going to be tipping the Broncos, and I'm going to, because I am a believer, I'm tipping them 13 plus.
I would not be surprised if the Broncos do win. If they can get out of the gates early and give us 80 minutes, if they did blow Melbourne away. But as I said, I've tipped Melbourne. So, JR, on that note, who is taking out the Clive Churchill medal in a comprehensive Broncos victory for you?
Payne Haas. Like, I think we spoke about the reasons why I think he will be it. Like, Reece Walsh was a potential for it, as is Adam Reynolds. But I think Payne Haas is going to be the tip here.
Well, there you go. A bit of Payne Haas. Ben Dunn, are you on the Woodbury Warrior to get it as well? So who are you going here?
I'm going Carrigan. He's got a bit to make up for, and the fact that he missed out on that game on the weekend with his suspension. So I think he's going to come out like a house on fire, and I think he's really going to lead the way and sort of help carry that load for Payne Haas, take a bit of pressure off. So yeah, I think it's going to be Carrigan.
Yeah, right. I'm going to go a little bit of a bolter here. I'm going to go for Alicia Katoa to win the Clive Churchill medal, the edge second rower for Melbourne. I think he has been the form second rower of the competition. I think with the fact that this is going to be two teams absolutely trying to keep as much ball in play and wear each other down, that's the styles they want to play. I think it's a chance for him to shine. We know the Storm pack's a little lighter on than it usually is with no Nelson and those sorts of things happening there. So Stefano's going to get it working over clearly, and that might leave space for Katoa to shine on that edge. But while we're talking grand finals, it's probably remiss of us not to quickly touch on the AFL grand final and give you another moment to gloat, JR. It was all tied up at half-time, but the Brisbane Lions marched on to back-to-back premierships and a chance now in 2026 to repeat the three-peat that they did 20-odd years ago. JR, how much of this did you take in, and how up and about were you on Saturday evening?
Look, Saturday evening, funnily enough, because of the timings of the grand final, I'm actually in transit to work for most of that time. So I was listening sort of on the ABC Listen app to get it. And then as I've entered sort of where my workplace, which is a venue where you can watch some sport, the mood was electric. It was actually quite fun to see, particularly given we're in a sort of a non-AFL region, although where I'm based at is a sort of AFL town actually, where my older brother actually got two premierships back in the mid-90s for the Marlins back in the day. So it was just great to see, and we might be seeing that second dynasty coming through.
It's certainly interesting to see. It was clinical in that second half. I think the stat goes from the 23rd minute mark, Dunny, of the third term to the 26th minute mark of the final quarter. Brisbane scored 11 goals for to 1 goal 1. You could be forgiven if you tuned off at halftime, just saying, was it a different game in the second half? They were locked up at halftime. Brisbane got out to a massive, almost 60-point lead at one point. Brisbane, Geelong, a couple of late goals just to save some blemishes. But this was an absolute clinic from an underrated Brisbane Lions side in the second half.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I've got a mate who's an AFL tragic, and he was talking it up about how great the grand final was going to be and how there's the two best teams and blah, 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 blah. And at halftime, when it was 36 all, and it had been one of the most boring halves of AFL football I've ever seen in my life, I was into him going, what are you talking about? And he was like, I suppose you think it'd be better if it was like a 50-point margin or something like that. And I was like, someone kick a goal, please. And then Brisbane certainly went on, and didn't they kick a few?
Well, they certainly did. They absolutely poured them on in that second half as I went through there. They just periods of absolute dominance. As always, there was some controversy over the Norm Smith. A few Brisbane legends have come out and said that, Will Ashcroft probably shouldn't have got it. Some other players should have. But Will Ashcroft, back-to-back Norm Smith medals at 21 years of age. Are we seeing, Dunny, one of the next greats of the game?
Yeah, certainly looking that way. To be that successful so early on in your career, it sort of leaves you quite a trajectory for the rest of your career, I suppose. But look, I can kind of understand the criticism in the selection, but at the same time, particularly in that second half, Brisbane did not have a bad player. And if you're going to give it to someone, why not give it to someone that has so many touches and does have such an impact on the ball, whether it would contribute to goals or not? He was definitely in and around and causing havoc that whole second half, and probably one of their better players in that sort of dull first half as well. So I can kind of understand why they gave it to him. But look, you could have picked any sort of 5, 6, 7 Brisbane players and given it to them, and you couldn't have had much of an argument for it. And that's how strong they were in the second half.
Yeah, they certainly were. JR, it'll be a fun dinner table conversation at the Ashcrofts. You've got 2 Norm Smiths, 2 premiership medals for Will. Younger brother Levi's got a premiership medal now. And then you throw in the fact that their old man, Marcus Ashcroft's got 3 of his own premiership medals. So, not a bad dinner table conversation.
Yeah, look, he's probably getting stuck into the boys where's number 3, boys? What's happening? Catch up, which I think is great. If Brisbane can sort of get there again, I think they can do it again as well. So, there's potential for that 4th grand final in a row, 3rd win in a row. So let's see where this goes next year.
Yeah, we'll certainly see. They're looking to build a dynasty. Panthers we won't talk about what happened when Ivan got asked about that. That's a whole story for another day. Dynasties don't have to be consecutive, is what I'll remind a lot of people. Let's move along and head into a little bit of cricket. The Sheffield Shield, Dunny, with the bat off, as we're calling it, is going to get underway. There's plenty of cricket happening, which we'll talk about in a moment. But the Sheffield Shield's about to get underway. It'll get underway this weekend on the long weekend, just to pile on a bit more sport that we've got to try and keep our eyes across. South Australia broke that 29-year drought, and they'll head in fairly well favoured by many. But it looks, when you have a look at some of these squads, as a fairly open competition, and it's all going to be about who can get started the best, and that might also be the way that the opening batting spot is determined for the Ashes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on it. Like, all the squads look pretty strong so far, and it's going to be an interesting start to the season. I don't think we're quite back to the halcyon days of New South Wales having 10 of the 11 starting Test players. But look, there's a fair spread amongst most of the state teams now, and I'm looking forward to watching some of it and sort of seeing some of the young fellas come through, because it seems like cricket's having a bit of a resurgence in Australia, and then we are seeing some new generation come through with quite some talent. So, yeah, I'm interested to see how it goes this year for sure.
Yeah, there's certainly going to be some exciting players. No big state-to-state movements. Probably the most notable, Jackson Bird going back to Tasmania from New South Wales. But JR, I'm pretty excited. Gary's going to captain New South Wales in round 1 of the Sheffield Shield. That's got to be something to be excited about, surely.
Look, it's definitely something to be excited about. Like, Gary sort of getting towards sort of the twilight of his career, if you will. But like him being available for Sheffield Shield with his sort of where he's at with now the international game is sort of great as well.
Yeah, it's going to be good to see some of those players in the Sheffield Shield action. The one puzzling thing, we're talking about this just before off air, there's a new substitution rule, not just concussion substitution, but an injury rule. It's got a lot of asterisks all over it. I'll try and recap it as simply and as quickly as I can, but it'll probably confuse me more than it'll help. So basically, any player that is injured or ill across the first 2 days of a Shield match can be substituted like for like. Fast bowler for fast bowler, spinner for spinner, wicket keeper for wicket keeper. The opposition can then make a tactical substitution in response, but again, must be like for like. So if the other team does a spin bowler for a spin bowler, you can do a spin bowler for a spin bowler. The injured player who gets subbed out then faces a mandatory 12-day non-playing period to stop people abusing the rule. Concussion substitutes remain unlimited. But the big asterisk on all of this is that travelling teams are only allowed to take 12 players anyway, so the chance of having a like for like are pretty bloody slim, Ben Dunn.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do all-rounders count? Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting rule in the fact that, like, they're trying to create an opportunity for someone to sort of come in and step in and fill a spot so that teams aren't too hamstrung by it all. But yeah, 12 in a travelling tour certainly makes that a lot more difficult. So it'll be interesting to see how teams constitute their teams moving forward to be able to take benefit of it, or is it just something that they go, well, there's nothing we can really do about it when we're travelling at the moment, so we won't worry? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how they manage it.
Well, JR, the caveat to that is if you go to WA, you can take 13. Obviously, what I'm thinking will happen here, though, is if you're playing on the East Coast or the eastern 5 states, which will include SA in, and, you know, the Ben Dunn goes down playing for New South Wales, does a hammy. Well, if you don't have another rangy fast bowler or slow medium, whatever Ben Dunn's throwing down, then you're getting someone on a flight that afternoon that he injures it, ready to go the next day, which could be a risk in itself, but that's kind of the piece. And I like the stand-down period, though, to make sure that people aren't taking the mickey.
That's right. Like that sort of thing sort of builds in protection, because it's like it is a rather large penalty, particularly like the way some of these games are scheduled. Like there may be 2 games in that period, so you need to be very careful doing this sort of thing.
Yeah, well, that's right. There'll be 1-day games in terms of the 50 over competition. They're all bundled in as well, and there's risks of missing multiple games, as you just say. But there's obviously a lot of other cricket going on at the moment. As we record, we're in the midst of the Australia-New Zealand T20 series. We've got the Women's World Cup as well. We'll be talking about those on the Daily Doses, and we've also got the Aussie Under-19s in Brisbane taking on India Under-19s. A lot of those games are sort of in flux, in play, about to get underway. So by the time we release our weekly episode, we'll probably be out of date, which, most of our takes are normally wrong. We don't just need to make them out of date. So that is the key with that. So but tune into the Daily Doses. There'll be plenty of those coming around a lot of those topics. To wrap it up, we're all proud Novocastrians. An adopted one, admittedly, for you, JR, but that's all right. The Newcastle Jets chasing their first silverware in 17 years in the Australia Cup final this weekend. Lakeside Stadium, That's been controversial enough in its own because it's not Heidelberg's home ground. There's a few other issues with it. There's an athletics track around it. But this game, the Australia Cup final, Dunny, lots of narrative around it because not only are Newcastle chasing their first piece of silverware in 17 years and only the second in the club's actual history, Heidelberg are the second ever NPL side to appear in an Australia Cup final after Sydney United a couple of years ago. And if they win it, will be the first side to do so. So momentous either way.
Yeah, 100%. And look, Heidelberg can go in at nothing to lose, right? Like no lower tier team has ever won it. They have the chance to do it. So they can throw everything at the Jets, come out firing, play for whatever, and they win good. If not, well, they weren't expected to win. So they've done really well to make it that far. So the pressure is definitely on the Jets. And I just hope that the players don't have that sort of mindset going into it. I hope they just go out there knowing with the confidence that they are an A-League side, that they've got the runs on the board, that, so to speak, following on from cricket, like they have the talent and the ability to get it done, and don't get sort of too overawed by the occasion and the pressure of not being the first A-League side to lose to an NPL side. So anyway, hopefully they come home with the silverware.
Yeah, look, I look, in all honesty, I think this is make or break for the Jets' A-League season as well. If they lose this game, that's going to set the tone for them going into the A-League season.
100%. Can you imagine how crippling it would be mentally?
Oh, you got to remember though, 3 A-League sides have already lost to Heidelberg. Other sides, A-League sides have lost to other NPL. You know, Apia beat Melbourne City.
But
I want to take the positives.
Yeah.
I'm a glass half full kind of guy, JR. I am, looking at this and going, Mark Milligan has a very young side, quite an inexperienced side, and they are building towards something here. This is a great effort from them. Yes, they should win. They'll go in as favourites, which is quite funny, because they've barely gone into any of these games outside of the local derby against Cooks Hill as favourites, which they were clinical in, but they're full of confidence. I had Lockie Bayliss on the show the other week. If you haven't checked out the In Their Shoes episode with Lockie, it is a great chat. Lockie's a great young guy on the rise. Shame he's now a Kiwi by technicality, but anyway, we'll let him have it because he got to go to the Olympics. But I'm really excited for this. I'm going to be at the game, looking forward to this in Melbourne. It's a huge weekend all in sport around the country. We haven't even talked about the NBL, Dunny. We've talked plenty on that during the last couple of weeks. We had our power rankings video go up and then the New Orleans Pelicans here as well. But we're wishing the Jets all the best for this weekend.
We just, before we wrap up, if Heidelberg do win it, $450,000 prize money for an NPL club, that would be huge. The things that they could do with that, holy mackerel.
Yes and no. I think some of these NPL clubs, you've got to remember, especially at the peak of the Victorian and New South Wales NPLs and with the Australian Championship, are probably spending 50 to 60% of that on wage bills.
Yeah, true. Fair enough. But I mean, that's got to dwarf any prize money that they're going to get in any other competition. So
certainly, yeah.
Fantastic for them to win.
I think it'll be alongside those pieces with the Australian Championship as well. And, it'll be interesting. But it'll certainly be, I think it might actually be more impactful for the Jets financially, JR, to be fair.
Look, I think there's a bit of that going on, yes.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting question. Anyway, we'll say no more. But look, a big thank you to you, Ben Dunn, as always. Appreciate you coming on and getting across everything that we've touched on today.
No worries. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here as usual.
And JR, the heavy lifting, we're talking about it before, about players doing the heavy lifting. Glenn Lazarus, you're our very own Glenn Lazarus, getting through the middle, mate, doing all the hard work and the production.
Mate, pressing buttons and to sort of having a chat, this is a challenge.
Well, who said men can't multitask there? It is. There it is. Well, thank you, lads. And a big thank you to you all for tuning in. It has been another bumper episode covering the black and white of your sporting landscape. No grey opinions here. If you haven't already, hit subscribe down below on the YouTube. Make sure you are following along. Lots of daily doses coming later this week with lots of sport happening. There's also plenty more you can catch on our social media channels at The Chris Mack Show on X, on Instagram, on TikTok, and on Facebook to keep up to date with it all the views, all the opinions, and everything in between. But until next time, a big thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to bringing you the black and white of all your sport again very, very soon.